Yeah, me too.
We are ready whenever you are, Madam Chair.
All right, so we are live. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our Committee of the Whole work session. And we're here on Tuesday, January 18th at 10:30. And we may have some members of the public that are here by phone or electronic means. Are we aware of any? No. All right. So at this point, we'll move on with the first item on our agenda, which is Commissioner Travel and Time Report Review. And April Zimmer has done a great job of putting together a model for us to discuss and talk about and reflect on so that we can do a better job of kind of tracking our responsibilities, the time commitment that we're putting into our roles as commissioners. And so I'd just like to open it up. Are there any other comments or questions that we have by commissioners? Commissioner Storley.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe Commissioner Hawkins, you brought this before the board as an idea, and we said, go ahead and put it on the committee of the whole. My questions and comments to you is, one, who keeps track of this? Who's going to look at it after we fill it out, and what is the point?
My opinion, or I did it on my own looking at the previous per diems. I went into the auditor's office and just asked to see each of our files. And I personally did a spreadsheet. I wanted to get a sense, was the division of duties among the five of us, did it seem fair? That was my initial reasoning. And in that process, realized the way we were reporting things I couldn't tell. It didn't make, I didn't understand how. So it was just for my own personal knowledge and understanding, so that I think as a board, we can try to ensure that there's fairness in our division of duties. So that was my personal reason.
So my next question is then, who's going to check this, and who's going to evaluate if we are being fair among all of us? Because it varies from month to month, season to season. Where do you go when you get all this filled out? Where does it go?
So,
I don't know.
Commissioner Storley, as part of my job, I intake all of your travel expenses and check through them and then submit those to the auditor's office. So this would be something I can imagine would be housed in the administrator's office. I believe my understanding was this tool would not go to the auditor's office. This would basically be used when we get to the comp study and commissioner classifications. This is kind of what that tool would be used to see how much time you guys spend on meetings.
And if I could back up just a little bit, this is something that seems to have kind of taken on a life of its own pretty quickly. And so from an administrative standpoint, Commissioner Storley, I think your questions are on target. Tracking information is good if it can be used for a beneficial purpose, and if doing so doesn't create undue burdens. And so if it's the will of the board to track meeting time in a different way than we have in the past, we can certainly enable that. But I do want to be very mindful of the work burden that it could create. As we all know, things in the organization right now are stretched pretty thin, and anything that entails new time commitments on already burdened staff is something that we want to approach with great caution. So that's my 2 cents on this.
And I guess I would echo that. My thought is this is really a tool that we can use internally as a group, not for somebody to, keep track of how much time we're spending on anything, but for us as a board of commissioners to be able to look at, are we sharing our responsibilities equitably? And then for also the purposes April Zimmer mentioned, looking at how much time do we spend? Are we compensated adequately? That was a discussion that we had at the end of 2021 and at the beginning of 2022. And so to just each of us keep this information, we can certainly send it to April to house that information and keep it all together in one place and send it on a monthly basis, but not to create any work for anyone. This is a tool for ourselves to be able to evaluate what we're doing and making sure that we're all sharing in the workload. Thoughts from other commissioners?
Madam Chair, I'm pretty excited. I do hear the concerns about potential additional burdens. Also, we should just be cognizant that anything we record like this is public knowledge, and so it can go all directions. To the point that things change month to month, I think is worth noting too. For my own benefit, I think I'm gonna like to have one for the year and just kind of keep it running, because that'll give me a much more comprehensive vantage point. A couple other thoughts or ideas I had about the table itself. The virtual in-person is significant. However, I feel like it can be adequately recorded with travel time, whether we travel or not for a meeting. If there's no travel time, then it's virtual. So I don't know that we need a whole column. Also, what I'm finding in a lot of my meetings is kind of follow-up. There's both the preparation and then also the follow-up, because things come up in the meeting, and so there's the follow-through to take time on, and that usually takes more time than the prep and sometimes than the meeting itself. So I think that's a column that would be valuable for my style. But otherwise, I'm generally pretty exciting, and I think it is just a tool. We don't have to do this, but I think, and even if one or two of us don't, or just one of us does, it'll just give us that much more information to be able to work with to get better perspective. So, so I don't want anyone to have more burden than is helpful. But for me, this is going to be extremely helpful. I think. Well, time will tell. So thank you for putting it together. It should be pretty straightforward.
And for clarification, Commissioner Mills, so to take out the virtual and in-person column, where would you like the follow-up column to be placed? Do you want it at the very end after the total time is calculated, or right before that?
Right before, probably, because then it adds up in the total.
Okay.
And I don't know if we can do some pretty fancy functions down the road, I suppose, as well. But and just one other thought I had too is again, just for my own comprehension and understanding, I'll probably even just have conversations, a lot of conversations in the time I spend in conversations, just to know. I want to have that comprehensive view of our role and the time that's required. So,
Commissioner Mills, I really like the idea that you talked about it being annual. I would agree that every month our schedules are so different. Some of us meet for an organization 2 times a month. Sometimes we don't meet except quarterly. And so I think having that running total and looking at it at the end of the calendar year is a really valuable piece. And I would also concur, you talked about that extra column. I like that as well, because I was thinking, a column for research and follow-up. So that nails it right there. So thank you for that.
yeah, and the disadvantage to the annual is, if there's any procrastinators, then that can go south real hard. And so even with monthly reports, there's a lot of procrastination on my end that goes into that. So it's on me to stay on top of that, and the consequences of not are even greater with the annual. So but beyond that, that was the only disadvantage I could see, and I don't think most of us have that issue.
Well, actually, I probably would be behind you on that one. I realized, oh gosh, and I'm going to fill this out, and I'm going to try to do it on at least a weekly basis.
Well, yeah, I was thinking like right after the meeting. But
we could be buddies on. Have you done yours yet?
Yeah, past partners.
Commissioner Slawson, what are your thoughts?
If it's something that people think would be useful, I'm certainly willing to do it. I don't see, unless you're going to utilize it for data analysis going forward for, whether it be per diem or for compensation or that type of thing, that's the only value I see in it. Short of that, I mean, I took on the job, I'm willing to take on all the responsibilities, time commitments, anything that goes with it, at the rate of pay that was provided when I ran for office, so it really doesn't matter to me. That's just my thoughts, guys, but because I did, as Commissioner Storley said, I really, when I first looked at it, I was like, if somebody's going to be tasked with sitting down and analyzing all of this, my answer is no. Because I don't want our staff to have to touch that, period. I just don't. They got enough on their plates right now, they don't need to sit and analyze what we're doing.
I would agree. I think it's
You know.
just a tool for our
Yeah,
conversation.
and I'm feeling better as we're going through this because, yeah, if this is something that people would get value by being able to kind of track time and see how it's being on there, it would certainly illustrate for other people that were considering coming into this role a better view overall of, you know, what that task is really all about, you know. But I do think you're going to see variances in it in just how committed people are to documenting everything that goes along with this.
Yeah. Similarly to any time study that an
Exactly
organization
right.
does,
It's how much-
people approach
yeah.
that in different ways.
Yeah, well, that's just the reality of it, you know, but I certainly am willing to, you know, enter my data and carry it forward there as we go forward, if that's what the group thinks there's value there.
All right. Any other thoughts or discussion?
So just one more question about process. So the idea would be that each of you would receive a copy of the spreadsheet. You would, during the year, track your time for various meetings, travel time, follow-up, et cetera. And then at the end of the year, would there be a work session to discuss this, or what comes after that?
That's my vision, is that at the end of the year, we take that information that we've collected and gathered and have a discussion precisely.
And I think this type of meeting would be the right, you know, forum for that. If it's just for our discussion and review and understanding and this type of thing, that's what I would feel most appropriate as we come together with the data, share it with each other ahead of time, and then come in and have it here as, you know, a committee of the whole type of discussion.
You know, I would really appreciate it, but again, I don't expect any one commissioner to do this. I just want to do this for myself, and anyone who does do it, I think is going to help the conversation, you know, so I know we all got plenty going on, so if it doesn't happen, but the more we can make it happen, I think the better off. The organization, the board, our future commissioners' understanding of what the job entails, I think it would be beneficial.
And I really think it's a common way that we can track. I know all of us have little notebooks and things on our phones and different ways that we keep track of what we do. This is just a common tool that we can all share as we do our work and reflect upon it. So, all right, in April, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to all of us and doing your magic and creating a really nice spreadsheet that's easy to use.
No problem, I will make those changes and I can email out the spreadsheet to
Yeah, another thought and a potential risk is for us to do this, and then for the public to say, well, look at them, they only spent this amount of time, or look at them, they're spending way too much time, and just that kind of scrutiny. I do see risk there, but
You are going to have some of that.
yeah, and so I just want to recognize that ahead of time, but also know that I see it as a valuable tool, even with that risk. Yeah, it can go all directions, so it's, which you'll have, I think.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. That makes me wonder too, I mean, is the existence of this tool going to create any undue pressure on commissioners to, I mean, a sense of competition that isn't really productive. I mean, really, I can easily see where, if I were a commissioner and we were tracking our time, I think I would feel some level of pressure to maybe, I don't know, to demonstrate that I'm doing my job by, I don't know. I don't want this to be an impetus for people to spend their time in ways that they wouldn't otherwise, I guess.
And I would hope this would be just a transparent way that we're recording what we are doing. You know, I don't see myself, for example, changing the way I work, the methodology I use, and I don't expect that other commissioners would be doing that either. So.
And I'm not part of this
What?
discussion, but really, but I just, some people, I've seen commissioners over the years, and some people take less time, less conversation to make up their mind, come to a decision.
That's correct.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might not reflect in the time spent either.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends on your background
Right.
and
So
experience and that type of thing.
I wouldn't want to put too much,
Yeah.
Right.
value judgment on it that
Right.
way.
And it's clearly, it's not a performance tool, it's just a way of collecting information on what we do.
So April, when you get them, don't put a star on one of them.
Or a smiley face, or a frown.
Oh, I can't get those little stickers and.
Well, okay, stickers, yes, yes. Another thought I had too was just that, when an organization is being run well, I think it takes less time to run, right? If we're doing our jobs well, it will take, so my goal is to reduce how much time I need to spend, but frankly, I feel like we need a lot of time, and with staff shortages, we need more time, so there's many different factors in what's gonna be adding to workload or reducing workload, and just a lot of ins and outs, but again, I think this will help with perspective.
Yeah. I also think there are issues that pop up that nobody plans, right? And I'm thinking about the dog kennels on County Road 14. When that issue came up, I know you all did site visits and spent a lot of time trying to understand the issue and being prepared for public discussions on it. And that's something that, that's an example of the kind of thing that can really generate a lot of work. So I think you're right, Commissioner Mills, that the goal is always to try to be efficient, but there are certainly issues that come up that just require an investment of time.
Or even, one point the active that make labor negotiations, that's a much, so there's lots of different variables in here, but it'll be a good tool, so I appreciate the work.
And just think about the times, for me anyways, that I've been on the phone.
Right?
Oh, that should be recorded.
Yeah.
People call.
Yep.
And then email
Yep.
to people, responses.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to buy a whole 2 or 3 reams of paper.
Right, and that's it's part of the,
Yeah.
But I thought that would be a good comprehensive view, if we can. It may not be practical all the time. We'll just do the best we can.
All right, well, thanks everybody for developing something. Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I guess I want to clarify. Are you talking of us sending it to April every month? I would guess I'm just thinking, when you're saying reams of paper, that we're just have it on our spreadsheet or on our computer and we're adding to it and April doesn't need
My
to print them out.
impression was
I
we were
don't know.
talking about an annual piece, and then we would
Yes,
send
I
it.
just want to make sure I know what is expected.
Absolutely.
Well, I do paper because right now I'm in the transition of probably getting a new computer, but I don't keep a lot on there. This is what I do,
Oh, okay.
so count on paper.
I can print several if you'd like.
No, that's, I can print them once I get a regular copy to proceed when I can.
And that's a really good point, because that'll just change, the amount of work for you, or not, or just when we get into an analysis or the tool that could change things a little, so, but that's really a good point, that having the paper copy is going to be different than than what
All right, well,
So-
thanks for the good discussion, Administrator York.
Yes, so just one more question. So if the intent is to do a work session at the end of the year on this, I know, I've heard you say that this is not going to create any new work for staff, but how's that discussion going to occur? Like, what kind of foundational documents are we going to create for it?
I'm envisioning it would be very similar to the conversation that we had at the end of this year when we were talking about increasing our wages and looking at it in light of kind of the work that we're doing in relationship to the comp study, kind of seeing how we compare with other county employees, just to get a picture. I don't know that necessarily we would have other documents and things that we would look at.
So would the spreadsheets or scans of records that commissioners have kept, those would be posted on iCompass?
I would feel comfortable with that at the end of the year. How about other commissioners, or would you want to post totals for each column? That's a really good question.
I don't know, how would you,
You know,
if you have the hour?
if there was just a summary that you would do
Yeah.
of your report.
Well, wouldn't you have different categories then? The
Yeah.
hours, the travel, the meeting title? Hmm.
Because we could create the spreadsheet so that it would add it up. I mean, if you entered the time, it will add up for you.
For sure. But there's still the question of how does it all get synthesized, I guess?
Right.
That's a really good question that I had not thought of.
Would we have outside counsel?
Well, certainly our HR department could assist us with a conversation regarding that. I have not talked to Leah specifically about that.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question, I guess.
So we all get together at the end of the year to talk about the data you've collected. How is that data presented? Who compiles it? How does it get into a format that everybody can look at and say, oh, here's how the hours stacked up for each commissioner? It seems like there would have to be some kind of synthesis at the end of it to enable that discussion.
Well, my thought on it would be just that each commissioner does it on their own and is in charge of that report. And then in our end of the year discussion, we can all just share with the group of what we reported on. And we could also share about how thorough we have been or not. Just like, yeah, maybe missed a few or whatever, a few lines or reports. But that seems like the maybe not as formal and concrete, but it seems like it's going to be the best way to not burden staff and have some kind of productive conversation. Is that-
So Dave, what I'm hearing is that it's going to be more verbal than turning in or putting a spreadsheet out, because that would become a different level of information. Is that what you're saying?
I think it'd be valuable to hand something in at the end of the year and have a shared drive. But when it comes to the actual meeting itself, I think it'd be fine just to have our summaries, and whether they're verbal or they're electronic or whatever. I think just for that one time of inputting, I don't think there's too much burden there.
I have one other thought. Would we want Attorney Hicken to talk about our logs and look at those. Sometimes when you create a log, it is could be a legal document that could be used in certain situations. And I think before we make a final decision on presentation and all of that, it would be valuable to talk to Attorney Hickman.
Now you see where the concerns were coming in earlier. All of these things sound fine and simple initially, and then unintended consequences and different things come
Right.
out in different venues you have to look at in this type of thing.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, I think we've talked about risk already. There is risk, whether it's just public perception, and, you know, kind of in past conversations with Attorney Hickman, even having, you know, this meeting televised, there is risk with creating data. And that's what we're doing, is creating more data. So there is more risk, but my take on it is there's more value for the conversation than there is risk. I'm not all that concerned about risk, and it's, I think, always wise to consult our legal counsel, but I don't want to burden her either way. It's kind of where we've had conversations already with that and risk, so.
I was going to say, we've mentioned Leah and Molly in this conversation, who are two of the busiest people in the organization right now, so.
I guess in the end, the value of this, I mean, I still don't completely comprehend what the value of this product is going to give us beyond what we already know of our positions and what we're doing. You say equal, you know, that's always going to be a shifting thing as you go through, depending on how active different committees are in this type of thing. And if you're looking at it from a compensation, who are you trying to prove it to? Right? I mean, because the group right here is the ones that decide, one way or another, whether you think you should get a pay raise, not get a pay raise. You don't have to prove it to yourselves. I mean, you either believe you deserve it or you don't.
Yeah.
I just, in the end, it's an interesting thing, but interesting things don't always add value. Certainly not worth the investment and the additional, you know, things that go out there and public data that runs out there. Like I said before, guys, if you want me to fill it out, I certainly will. But would I do this just to have the information? No, I would absolutely would not. It really just doesn't add any value to me. I took the job, I'll do whatever it takes to do the job. My time will be different than another commissioner's time. I know when I first came on, I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to be prepared for every different thing. I'm finding that's less, as you said, as you get more experienced and you do these things, you know what to go look at, where to go find it, who to go talk to, you know, so it's always gonna shift around, but you know, it's just, in the end, what's the end goal, right? What do we really, for the investment of time and things you're doing, what does it look at? And I'm skeptical as well that in the end, will we be able to do this and not have some facet of staff have to put in hours doing something with this data, if nothing else, taking it, recording it, or putting it into a format that it becomes public record.
One thing that's abundantly clear is that you all spend, I mean, we just heard this at the end of the Public Health and Human Services Board meeting. You guys spend a lot of time going to meetings, and that is part of the job description. Would cataloging, you know, your attendance, would that need to go to more or fewer meetings? It wouldn't.
No.
No, it doesn't change anything
It does
about how
not
we
change.
do our jobs.
Right.
This form will do nothing to change how I approach my job.
So
In
the
any
cost
way.
benefit question is really important.
How about this? If I were to send this document to AMC and talk to AMC, I think we might get a little different perspective than what we have here internally. We can get some feedback from them and not worry about engaging Molly and Leah at this point, but to see if they feel this is an appropriate thing and what the risks might be versus what the value of this would be. Would people feel comfortable with that?
I would think that's great. So, involve more commissioners from other counties, I think would be very valuable. For me, it's not necessarily what we get from this. Of course, I'm always hoping to broaden my understanding and comprehension of my own time. And I guess interesting to see other commissioners too, but I see this as future, commissioners. Say that I'm encouraging someone to run for a commissioner seat, and they say, well, what does that involve? And I could paint a picture, and a picture was painted for me.
Oh, yeah. I talked to 3 different,
Yeah.
previous commissioners who gave me background, told me what to expect, and,
Yep, and there's different pictures painted,
Sure,
and
sure.
there's similarities, but there's certainly differences, and so I just see it as a more concrete-ish data point to reference and to give that kind of more thorough, but, no, I see the burden, and I see the risk.
What makes it a burden is when you do it in a formal fashion where it
Yeah.
becomes a public record. There's nothing
That's
that
true.
prevents any of us right now today, if you're more interested, you could take this product that's been put together and just start to use it on your own accord to see how do I spend my time and what, if that's of interest to you. But you don't have to do it in a fashion that then it all comes together, and then, as
Yeah.
you say, there's a report card that basically whether you want it to be or not, it is. And,
Sure. Well, that's got me leaning to the independent mind here.
Yeah.
And as I say, everybody's got one, and in the end, if you do it and you decide to keep track of it, and you want to, at the end of a meeting or something, or when you're walking out to the parking lot, ask one of the other ones, what's it looking like on hours and such, you can go right ahead and do that, as long as you don't get 3 of you together and conspire to do something with it, then,
Well, let's try using this independently. I will also contact AMC
Yeah.
and kind of get their thoughts and
Getting
feelings
that
about it.
independent thought, I don't have an issue with
Any other discussion or ideas? This is great.
I feel like we've gone in a number of different circles.
that. We have, but that's not uncommon, and I really appreciate Administrator Yorkie's longer range view to say, okay, so how is this all gonna, and oh, by the way, it's gonna add to another meeting to you at the end of the year, whether you do nothing else with it, you're still gonna have a meeting that this is the whole topic of your meeting, is to have a discussion on this, so. And even prepping for the meeting is gonna require some staff time or something else, so.
Absolutely. Good point.
Yeah, you can't get away from it.
Good points. All right, well, we'll move forward with working on it independently. I'll get some insight from AMC. And, as you were talking, Commissioner Mills, about future commissioners, and Commissioner Smallson, you were talking about talking to former commissioners, we may have some change in commissioners based on some information that Auditor Powers has for us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Auditor Powers for his presentation on redistricting.
That's a formal segment.
Smooth
Great.
move.
That was great. So, first I'll just say this is a brief presentation. The Secretary of State has a redistricting guideline that goes on for 80 pages, so.
That we should all read this evening?
Well, and that's just a summary of, there's more in the legislation too. It's based on the legislation, so you can go into it very deep, because there's a lot with other entities, the legislators and things, and this is gonna focus mostly on us. Should I wait till Dave comes back?
Is he
I
coming
think
back?
that probably would be best.
I
Yeah.
think so. It's
So,
like,
and I expect some questions, and I'm not gonna have answers for all of them, so I'm gonna make notes and get back. That's what the
do you have
guide-
maps to pass out?
There's just one in the presentation. A lot of thanks to Kyle, this is great. This is super step up from 10 years ago. Where,
Really?
well, 10 years ago, we could make our own maps, but they weren't interactive. It
Oh,
was just
I see.
like, here's what you're gonna do, and then boom, you know, you create a map and you can print it out. And then you can print it out, and now you can go in and work it, and it doesn't save itself yet. He's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
create, like, here's Plan A, and then, you know,
Yeah.
be able to keep that and then do a Plan B. He
Okay.
wasn't quite there yet, but, so this is all a little new, but just vastly, 20 years ago, it was, you got a rolled up maps
Oh,
from
sure.
the Census Bureau, and then you tried to just put that into words, you know, and when you got it all finished, then you would draw a line somewhere you thought, because you didn't want to mess it up, because you only had one copy.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what is redistricting? It's just the process of redrawing the boundaries of election districts after the completion of the 10-year census. And the main purpose is to ensure that people of each district are equally represented. So just, you know, stop anytime. So there's the legislature that does congressional, legislative districts, city council. In our case, Grand Marais doesn't use wards and precincts, and they've declined to even take a role in it in the two censuses previously. I think ideally, they would just confirm the precinct line that I think the county established the precinct before I got here, so it's more than 30 years, this precinct line at Grand Marais hasn't changed. They should ideally, you know, just have a resolution that says, yes, that's, because it's their city, but apparently it's not required because nothing has happened. Township boards, in our case, each town is a precinct. That simplifies that. School board, the school has chosen to follow commissioner districts, and they've done a resolution to confirm that every 10 years. The county board, of course, commissioner districts. So, precincts, so all cities and towns must establish precinct boundaries. And of course, our towns are a precinct. The city is really on the county wish that line to be there. And the city doesn't vote by wards or precincts, and they should confirm that ideally. And the county is required to create precincts in the unorganized territories. And up here, as you all know, we're not impacted by congressional and legislative districts. It would be amazing if they came up and moved one up here. But do we need to redistrict? It could be required based on annexations. We created a non-contiguous district if the city went out and, you know, annexed something, and now it's split District 2 pieces of it, and you would have to. And what happens with us, that's not happened before, but what happens with us each time is the district population varies by more than 10% from the average, and that causes the need to redistrict. A third one here is majority of districts can't have minority of population. Well, the 10% takes care of that for us. I went through mathematically because I was kind of scratching my head, and it can't happen with 5, but I think it can happen like St. Louis County has more districts. So therefore, in a place like that, it can happen, but mathematically it can't for us. And county boards can choose to redistrict even if it's not required. So you adjust them following each federal census. You create them as equal in population as practical. And you create election districts that are compact and contiguous. More of that. So in our final plan, we'll have a district description, district numbers, election schedule to ensure staggered terms, assuming there's a change. Well, I think you can do that in any case, whether there's a change or not. This is a time you could change the staggered terms. You don't necessarily have to continue the same pattern with terms. We always have, to as much as practical in the two that I've been involved in, but you're not required to. You need to publish the district plan, post them, is also recommended, notify the Secretary of State, city, the towns. Voters can contest to require us to redistrict if we haven't, or require a revision to a plan passed by the county. Well, you could have been more equal, you could have been, you know, something that, and they file that in district court. That's not happened in my time. So here's the basic schedule. So they release the census data at the end of September. Congress and legislative plans should be finished by February 15th. It doesn't mean they will be. That's the scheduled date. And then precinct and city redistricting deadline is March 29th. And then we have to finish ours, because we come after all of that, by April 26th. And that's driven by the filing. So the filing is open on May 17th. So it gives you 3 weeks to get the information out for filing. We have to notify anybody that's changed. That's another step in this. And then we have our state primary in August and our general election in November. Again, lawsuits can be brought if redistricting has not occurred. Courts have redrawn district lines when the legislature was unable to do so. I can't remember if that's happened here. So this is a little repetitive, but districts are bounded by precinct lines. So they don't cross, they're all within the districts. Again, contiguous, regular, compact, the 10% rule, 10% within the average, and a plan filed by the auditor. So population equality, how close to the average? That's one measure of equality. Compactness, how close in shape to a circle? We don't get very close. Contiguity, are there any islands or peninsulas? That's pretty easy to avoid. Equal protection, are all voters treated in an equal manner?
Brady, I have a question.
Sure.
Commissioner Mills and I share the district up around County Road 45, Babineau Corner, okay? That district is in the Lutzen Fire District. But everybody in that district that we share has a Grand Marais address. It's always interesting when I travel up there, try to get a hold of the people you can't even have a town hall meeting because it's so broken up. And it's frustrating for them too. So when that was formed, it was interesting that it wasn't like the whole swath.
Well, we could take a look at that, because you'll see later on, these are formed by the census blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big constriction
Okay.
in that you're not absolutely required in an organized territory to use the census blocks. You could do something else, but then you have to figure out who lives where.
Mm-hmm.
And we've never chosen to go that route in the time I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
We rely on the people taking the census to determine who lives there. And somehow you'd have to like duplicate what they do, only do it better. And figure out where another line would be.
Mm-hmm.
So without that extra work, you're kind of restricted, but there may be, when we look at it, there may be a way, when we look at the actual blocks,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we'll see it
Okay.
today, but I mean, I've
Mhm.
got it, so we can look at that when we, when the commission meets. So here's just a simple example of a contiguous
Mhm.
territory. So here's how it's defined. A point, a single point is not contiguous. It's got to have distance. So here's district populations cannot vary more than 10% from the average unless the result forces a precinct to be split, like if it did in a city precinct or in a town. Then you can violate the 10%. So here's our census, was 5,600. So the average size is 1120. 5 times 1120 is 5,600. 10% of that average is 112. So the variance below and above is 1,008 up to 1,232. That's the range we should shoot for. So do we meet the rule right now? District 1 doesn't. You can see that. It's outside by 27, too large. District 2 is considerably under the 10%, 903, 105 under. 3, 4, and 5 all fit between those numbers. So we have to change 1 and 2 to get within. Which commissioners need to run? Of course, your 4-year term is up. If the commissioner's district has had a change greater than the 5% rule, the law says everybody runs except if a district has not had a change of 5%, then they don't have to. So the presumption is everybody runs. So 5% rule is based on 5% of the average of the district population. So the average is 1120. 5% of that is 56. So here's, I'll just start with up above. These are the districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and this is called Plan A. This is the only scenario I looked at with the program Kyle put together, and I said, well, what looks like the easiest way for me? And I picked some census blocks to get within the averages, and you'll see that in the map. And I said, okay, we're going to take 8 census blocks from District 1, and that's 82 people. And we're going to give those to District 4. In 2, we're going to add 157. She needs at least 108, and which is 8 census blocks from District 4. 3, no change under Plan A. District 4 loses 157 to District 2, gains 82 from District 1, no change in District 5. The result of that in the column down below, Plan A. Now you've got 1177 in District 1, they're within the 10% rule. You've got 1060 in District 2, it's within the range. District 3, no change. District 4 went up and down, still within the range, much lower than before. District 5, no change under this plan. And then you can also see the population deviations there and the percentage deviations. And then the final column under Plan A, who would have to run? Everyone. District 1 changed more than 5%. I mean, you already had to, sorry.
That's correct.
District 2 changed more than 5% and has to run. District 3, 1, 3, and 5, because your 4-year terms are up. 2, because it's over 5%. 4, because it's over 5%. And actually, 4 is not, it's correct, it gives you the correct answer, but in another scenario, it would matter that you lost 157 and gained 82 because that's the actual number. So it's actually way exceeds the 5% because it's a total of the plus and the minus. What's the change? So that's really not reflecting, it doesn't matter in this case, but it doesn't reflect what would cause you. So here's the map. It doesn't show everything. It's tough on the screen to show everything. So I'll just point out, District 3 is the green on the bottom left. District 4 is the purple. Gunflint, Maple Hill, way up. District 2 is the blue in the middle. And kind of the, what do you call that? I always get colors wrong. It's a pink, red.
Salmon.
District 1, salmon, there we go. Is
Salmon's
District
always
1. So the black lines show what the census showed us. And so District 2 was just this blue in the center with the black lines, and the blue next to it is what I went, okay, I'm going to pick these to add to District 2. Those were all District 4. So there's 8, you can't see every one of them there, but there's actually 8 precincts there, and if you add them up, they add to that 157. Because there's like 4 at the bottom that you can't read. That's another precinct at the bottom. And so here's the, ideally, 2 is too small, 1 is too large. You would like to take from 1 and put to 2, but the way it was designed from the last census is 4 is in between. And you would create non-contiguous situation if you jumped over and took some of 1 and put it into 2, they wouldn't be contiguous. So she has 2, I shouldn't say she, District 2 has 2 choices to either go to the left to District 3, to the north, or to the northeast into District 4. Those are the only 2 contiguous choices. So that's what added to District 2. Then the next area you see highlighted in orange, that was all District 1 under the census. But then I went up and I picked those and said, well, let's put those back into District 4 so that 4 is large enough. And those added up to the 82. And there's some 0 precincts that are part of that 8. Or not, blocks, I'm sorry. Those are census blocks. So this map also just gives you a sense of what you're dealing with a census block. And census blocks are, those are created by the federal government. They look at what is, what's visible, basically. Roads, rivers, things like that. It might be a fence line. It might be, sometimes it's things that have disappeared. It might have been some kind of waterway that's now dry, but at the time they did this, that's where they put it. So they don't always make sense anymore, but at one time at least, these are based on basically visible demarcations, where they could make them small so that you have small things to work with to make your precincts, and you know, and get a count within them. So
How does one change a census block?
that's a good question to have Kyle here. I believe we have the right, if we had the ability to do it. I think it's a deep dive. I remember bringing it up once, like 10 years ago, and he and Marina and those looked into it and went, not now.
Too late.
Well, it isn't, it was just the complexities of dealing with the federal
Right.
system,
Right.
that they just went, you know. So I don't know. That would be a discussion to have with them, I think. And they would probably have discussions with others in order to answer that.
I
But-
see some of the lakes have a 0 population.
Could be. So, anything else here?
Curious, I just want to clarify primarily for the public that's looking
Yeah.
at this. In District 2, the new, or what you have on the map, which could be the boundary on the east, what river is that?
That's Kimball Creek.
Kimball?
That used to be the end of my district was Kimball Creek, so I take it that's, what you had.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I just
Mine
wanted
started
to
at
clarify
Kimball
because
Creek,
I'm sure.
and Kimball Creek is just before the western
Right.
entrance on County Route
Yeah.
14.
Right.
And up through 2000, that was District 1 came all the way
Okay.
over to there. And it was the shifting of the permanent population east has caused the, let's say, the difficulty. There's been a lot of growth in the west end, but not as much the permanent population, because when you look at a map, you can see that there's a lot of our non-public land is still concentrated in the Hoagland, Colville area.
That's really interesting. So there may be more development happening in the west end, and we're looking at property taxes. But as far as our, as you say, more permanent population, it's more on the east end, where that's just a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's difficult, I don't know.
Well, and it's, as you said, it's the availability of the land
Yeah.
for people to purchase and develop.
Any other questions here?
Well, and so the
Yeah.
orange and the green, that's just to highlight where the change is.
That's just to highlight the
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
The hard black line was the census boundary.
And how much monkeying around have you done with the GIS now?
Not a lot. This was really it. There's, some of the things you could look at is just District 2 going east. The simple one would be take the 124 you see in that census block to the east. Boom, now District 2 is good.
I'm sorry, where's 124?
Yeah, right to the west, I'm sorry, to the west of District 2.
Yeah.
There's a
The one green block.
There's
Oh,
a green,
yeah.
green
Yeah,
block
that's
of
a green.
124,
Yeah, yeah.
for example.
Okay.
Just an example of a
Uh-huh.
simple,
Uh-huh.
single census block that would bring them into compliance.
Uh-huh.
But then District 3, of course, would be too small,
Uh-huh.
and you wouldn't want them going into District 4 because they don't have a lot of excess, and so they would probably jump into District 5 to take some of District 5. So, I mean, that's another scenario.
Plus, it all has to get fed from District 1 anyway, because that's the one that's high.
But only by the 20, it's really technically high by 27, if I'm remembering right. So it's not hugely high, so 1 has to come from 4. It's your only contiguous district.
Right.
So you would be reducing District 4, but that would be like the minimum. Okay, so we know we're affecting District 4 by 27. As far as rerunning, doesn't matter.
And
27 doesn't hit the 5% rule. So if 2 going to 3 and 3 going to 5, 3 and 5 are running already. So the question in moving that way for only that reason is that meeting the goal of equal representation? Because that's the main goal. So that's what you have to look at. And it might be either way. Meets it, but that's something, if we have a commission, we'll wrestle with those questions.
Some of the thoughts I have, and that's why I was asking how much you monkey around with the map, is just any of those sharp, peninsulas, or say with District 2, that little sharp wisp along the gunfront there stands out to my eye.
Yeah.
And so I look at the 19 and the 19.
Yeah.
And is that a 7? That little triangle
For-
far south. Like I look
Yeah.
at that to try to make it less of a little,
Yeah.
Yeah.
jig, but then there's the math of what happens on the other side and all the ups and downs and that sort of thing. I
Well,
also,
that's-
I'm sorry?
Yeah, no, that's clearly another good option. Yeah.
And then, of course, it's not in this picture, but looking at our district maps, there's a couple of those way far north, Greenwood Lake, and then I guess up in the boundary waters. is
Yeah, we
kind of-
share
Yeah,
Greenwood Lake.
Greenwood and up on
All
Shoe
there-
Lake
looks like-
Road,
yeah,
that
crop
whole
that
area.
out. Yeah. Some of those are non-populated, but, so, my mind goes into those as well. Another, yeah, it's just interesting how, well, I'll stop there. It's very interesting.
It is. Yeah, you could easily come up with as many as you wanted to, but 3, 5, 7 different 9 scenarios, and just debate is this representing the population better? Is it more contiguous, compact? Yeah, you could add that 19. It would make it a little less of a point, but you'd still have a point with that 119. You could add the other 19 just below it. Then you got a point sticking into District 2. I mean, there's no perfect
Yeah.
answer. And my original thought was, well, we'll get District 4 off of Lake Superior. That would seem to be a rational, but there was no way to do it. There aren't, I was looking at
surprised
up.
when I first, because
Yeah.
before she had a very narrow block that kind of came down there, and now at least you have one where you've got a section of highway you can compass it.
And I spent some time looking up above, which isn't on the map here,
Yeah.
but there's nobody up there.
Nobody up there?
There's 2 here, there's 1 there.
Yeah.
You could
Like
take
when you talk Greenwood
enormous.
Lake for mine,
Yeah.
I've got 2 people that are up on Greenwood Lake that fall in mine, so I trudge down Shoe Lake Road there and then find that it's a gated community, I can't go talk to
Do you know, would it be easy for the census block map to be on our county mapping site?
I don't think, well, we'll ask Kyle. In a static form, or for people to,
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I wouldn't make it something.
well, I mean, for sure when we get done, we would do that. And the selfish consideration I have is, the more you change these, we have to remap the election system, and we have to send notices to everyone of what districts they're in, and et cetera. So it shouldn't be frivolous from that point of view, just from the amount of work involved.
Well,
Not that it's frivolous, but you
No,
know what I'm
right,
saying.
yeah, unnecessary.
Yeah.
Some of where my mind goes to is like, all right, well, this is this census, what do we see next census? Where do we just, deal with that when it gets to us, or are there ways we can try to, based on where we know private land, and is there ways we should, kind of letting things move or encouraging district boundaries to move because of potential growth and that sort of thing to make the job easier or more sustainable, but maybe that's too far thinking.
And that would be, I'm not going to claim I was thinking way ahead, but if I was, this is probably where you'd shift rather than going to the west for District 2.
Mhm.
Yep. No, it makes sense if you're seeing that road currently is coming off to the east to expand to the east. It just gives you that ability then to tap into where the expansion is.
I was surprised that we did gain as many as we did, because we were stagnant for umpteen years. And in the west of the county, my district, we have a lot of people, but they aren't residents.
That's correct.
And so we have more people, but they aren't counted as residents here.
Mhm.
So that's the unusual thing that happened in the last 10 years. So we don't know how to prepare for it.
Well, the other thing that could happen is if those people start changing to
Mhm.
full-time residents,
Sure.
suddenly the shift goes west,
Right,
you know,
yeah,
because there's a lot of them that could.
it could. Mhm.
Okay. So, terms staggered, so that if everybody runs, you guys will have to, it's totally up to commissioners. If you're gonna do this the same, if everybody runs and say, well, 1, 3, and 5 will be in one, and 2 and 4 on the other, and who's gonna start out with 2 years, and who's gonna start out with 4-year terms. And the law just says, you guys get to decide that.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
No, that's all.
Right.
What if a redistricting causes a commissioner residence to be shifted into another district?
Didn't see that. That didn't happen.
Not in Plan A. So,
Mhm.
may continue to serve in office between May 31st and the end of their term if they remain a resident of the county. Commissioners elected, in 2020, we didn't change that. Yeah, this could include their full year, 4-year term if the change is less than the 5% rate. And so you must reside in your district when elected. So this was the short presentation.
So what's the end result? Will things happen? Will they have to happen? A little bit here from that district, we'll put it there, or what's the end result of this?
Well, the end result is 2 has to have at least 105 added to get to the bare minimum, and 1 has to lose 27 to get to the bare ends of the 10%. And the ideal would get them all a little closer to the average, but those are the bare minimums.
And is that something you would do, or would it come down from the?
Well, we've never had a commission, we've never done anything outside of the auditor's office in the 2 that I've been here.
Mhm.
I sat in a room with a map and go, how should I, and come up with 3 variations, but I think you guys, you've created a committee. I can't remember, there's 2 commissioners.
Stacy and I.
Yeah, on it. So then the question too is whether, you know, to add, if you want to add some members of the public and have a commission that includes others. And whether you want to, let's say, just start out creating some options amongst us first, and then bring public in, rather than to keep that, their time commitment less. So those are, we have some time, because we're waiting for the legislature, but
Could you go back to the map, the map change? So the current eastern boundary of District 2 is Devil Shark River. And the Plan A would be eastern boundary of District 2 to go to Kimball, is that right?
I think that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
well, this isn't a proposal, it's just an option.
Yeah.
And we have some time, meaning till May, is that the time?
Well, April
April.
26th is when we have to,
Well.
it has to be done.
So
We
it's-
can't complete it until the others, the legislature, number
Mhm.
one. You could look at it and be all ready, but you can't
Oh,
actually,
Okay.
can't actually formally approve it.
Any other questions for Brady or comments? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I love looking at maps and playing with this, and I appreciate the work you've done. But knowing that my district is going to substantially change, I'm wondering how appropriate it is for me to help in that discussion. I'm just thinking about the optics of that, maybe that I'm not the best person to help Brady decide where those lines are. I'm just voicing that out loud while I saw this, thinking, I wonder, how does that work? So,
I don't have an answer for that. I can.
Yeah, so everyone, well, I guess Commissioner Sterling has.
Yeah, I guess you two are the ones that didn't, it appears, it
At
doesn't
this route,
affect.
right. But there
If
may
you would
be-
be willing to participate, because otherwise, clearly to have when
Yeah.
things are shuffling around and things, it's gonna affect mine, it's going to affect Commissioner Hawkins,
Probably.
and in between, I'm afraid you're just,
Yeah.
a participant because you're how it has to shift through to make things happen, it looks like.
Other than
Unless you start going west.
going west.
But-
So there is that option.
I'm sorry. We as a board vote on the plan, correct? So it is it's not
Everyone
just,
votes.
yeah, it
You're
is.
Still gonna be engaged one way or another.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't get to recuse yourself because of infection.
That's right.
You may not like it, you may like it a lot, it just doesn't matter in the end, you still get to vote.
Mhm. But to your point, Commissioner Hawkins, if you do feel uncomfortable about it, I'd be willing to work with Dave on it.
Mhm.
It's up to you.
Thank you.
Well, and I guess, yeah, I understand the concern. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a,
It just popped into my head when he reminded me that we're a committee. I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's appropriate. So I was looking for feedback of anybody else, if that triggered anything.
I guess I would like to talk more about as a group, just the option of pushing west. Can we talk about the impacts that would have, or what that means and how things shift? Because I'm thinking about how much development growth has happened in the West End, and just, as you say, that could shift to a more permanent residency. I half expect it to. I mean, I'm a little surprised, just knowing all that's going on. So I'm just trying to, again, think out the longer term game plan, which maybe it's just kind of impossible. But could you talk about that? Have you,
I haven't explored that. I think it's technically possible, is the best I could say. Just looking at them.
I was thinking, like, boy, it is kind of ridiculous that, ridiculous is the wrong word. I was thinking that, you know, similarly to keeping District 4, like all of the trail, but then I also see advantage to having all districts on the lake. I think that's kind of cool. But just the shapes, just trying to wrap my head around it. But then the trail population is so much more sparse that you need to have more of that concentration too. So lots going on. Both, you know, on the map and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, just looking at numbers, yeah, if you moved, like you say, that 124 from 3 into 2 brings 2 up to speed. 3 is still within the range. It's 1,000.
Oh,
33. And then if you did the same shift, well, you might not even have to do another shift. No. But you could, just to equalize it, and take some from 5 into 3, and they would both stay. So that is clearly an option. Well, we should.
And I still have to lose some from mine.
You always have to
Yeah.
lose 27.
27, though.
Yeah.
well, and District 2 always has to gain,
Correct.
and District 1 always has to lose
A
some. So-
minimum. But those are minimums, and it's like, the goal is to be equal representation. So, ideally, District 1 would lose more than that.
Right, because I've got how much I start off. Even when you take the ones you're taking out now, which was 80 some, I'm still, by population, the largest district.
Yeah, you're 139 over.
Yep.
27 gets you within the 10%.
Yep.
Ideally, you would lose more
Correct.
and get closer.
Yeah, you wouldn't just want to take it and bring it right down to the minimum, because then it would still be, you know, by population, it wouldn't be really represented compared to the others.
Yeah.
It would meet the 10%, but then you gotta ask yourself, does that really meet, you know, the criteria of what you're trying to do in the bigger picture? Now, I understood what you said when you were taking the larger sections, moving it over, and then bringing it into, you know, the
Yeah.
District 2. But we'll let the committee decide.
And you could do things like, instead of taking all of that from District 4, District 4 it's too bad because it's almost perfect right now. It's too off of the average. Here we have to mess with it.
But it was because of how it's laid out.
It's-
To
Yeah.
be able to make the flow of those districts go,
Right.
Right.
particularly out of one, you've got to go through,
It's gotta-
got to go through your area.
But you could take some from District 3, for District 2, and from District 4. You could reduce the amount from District 4, but I just did that because I thought, well, let's try and get District 4 off the lake, but that's impossible.
Yeah, you're not gonna do that on
Yeah. Without some other major shift coming down
Correct.
somewhere else.
Yep.
So yes, there could be many options for.
Well, it's interesting to have a jigsaw puzzle that can be put together in a variety of ways. And that's really how I view this, and,
If the pieces fit,
right,
that's the challenge.
make the pieces fit, and make sure it's equitable for all. Well, in terms of Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Hawkins being on the committee to look at that, do you both feel comfortable with that? Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Storley is willing to, step in. How are you feeling at this point after our discussion?
Well, I guess I'm still willing to do what I can. I just wanted to make sure, if there's any reservations by any of you, I will definitely step down, but I just want to make sure that, like I said, it just popped into my head and I said it, so I'm now that discussing this in a vote, and it's transparent
Okay.
discussion, I think if I can be of assistance, I'm
Great.
willing to do that.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions for Auditor Powers today?
So for next steps, when should we meet as a committee?
Later today.
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you
Okay.
guys. I will look at it. I want to see where Kyle is. And he wants to be able to save this, and call it Plan A, and then create another one to work on it and be able to save that. Like right now, I can't save it anywhere.
Okay, yeah.
So I want to find that out, and I can let you know on that, and then we can work on other options as soon as that happens. And I guess the question is where, but we can pick these things up. We can schedule it here or in any other room, I guess, and just look at and decide how many options we want to consider, and then I think the full board has to decide if they want to create a commission at some point. I don't have any information on commissions today. Maybe I should look at it further.
I like the idea of having 2 or 3 options and then getting some people together and,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just excited to start creating options.
Yep.
That's what I was asking.
All right.
But we'll wait on Kyle to just be able to save it, then we can go from there, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, we're just printing it out and not being able to adjust. Give it to other people, so, okay.
Well, thank you for all your hard work and information. It's certainly very helpful to have it at this point and start to think about it so we can make our decisions in a timely fashion. Because the time will go by very quickly.
It will.
That's for sure. All right, well, item 3 is minutes of our standing committees. We do have minutes from the building committee from December 10th of 2021. And beyond that, we have adjournment. Is there a motion?
We don't vote on anything.
I know we
Oh,
don't.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Friendly reminder.
Yep.